those thoughts that are constantly going through your head, those are the ones that you need to start noticing. There's looking at what is fact and truth. So you need to ask yourself, is what I'm thinking right now 100% true? Is it, Mark, that you've got your job? Did you put in time and effort into this? Have you worked hard to get where you are today? Or is it that you need a really good look at it and actually don't need to prove anything to anyone? Maybe I am good enough, and own it, those kind of things. You need to work out what is the facts here. So challenge those negative thoughts. This is a fun fact, you do have between 70 and 90,000 thoughts a day.
The Better Mindset Podcast.
Welcome to the Better Mindset Podcast, episode 9. I'm Mark.
I'm Bex.
Conversations about leadership, learning, and educational technologies. On today's episode, Paul shares some real insights into the future of AR in all industries and why schools should be thinking about engaging teachers and students with the skills to make the most of this emerging tech. We explore the first in a series of how-tos on building community, and we're going to start with building the benefits of using social media. And Bex gets vulnerable on her struggles and strategies for overcoming something that all leaders and teachers faced, imposter syndrome. And today's Making Waves is you, Bex. What have you got for us today?
It is. So today I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable. It's something that has affected me throughout my whole career, but I want to bring it to the forefront because I think the more we talk about it, it's one of those things that lots of people experience. So today we're going to talk about a circumstance that affects many people, but it's actually quite misunderstood and not talked about enough, in my opinion, and it's called imposter syndrome. So
Right.
So it's one of those things. If you've ever felt like a fraud or you don't believe that you belong in your job or your position and that you're just sort of pretending to be competent at it, or that you'll be exposed as a fake, or even though you've accomplished a lot and others seem to think highly of you, you don't see that, or that you think, I just accidentally got to where I am today. That's basically what imposter syndrome is.
It actually relates. Have you heard of the Peters principle as well? And this is one of the reasons why the imposter syndrome can be quite a big thing in our head. But the Peters principle talks about the fact that everybody rises to their first level of incompetence. So we get really good at teaching, and then because we're good at teaching, you get put into a lead role, as the lead teacher, or then you go into a DP role. But actually, you're actually a really good teacher. You're not a good lead teacher role.
I was actually just having that conversation with a principal yesterday, and we had actually worked together as teachers and then as team leaders, and then now he's in a principal position and I'm doing what I'm doing, and we were turned to look at each other going, how did this happen? Like it just happens, and you go, wow, I might be shaky when I talk about this today because it is something that I am still battling, I guess, and I still need to work on. It's a big work on for me, and it constantly is. But I'm going to take you through some ways that can support, as well as sort of a bit of a discussion around what imposter syndrome is. So
Great.
I think the other thing is that just as I touched on before as well, is that people that you look up to and go, I want to be like them in a leadership role. I want to be like them in a classroom, or they could potentially be facing this imposter syndrome as well, because there was a study done and 80% of people have felt this way in some way, which way or form. So it is a
100%
common thing. Yeah. It's generally, I've noticed a lot of the high achieving individuals are feeling not good enough, and their success is only due to luck or timing or other external factors that are bigger than their own abilities. So there are also some symptoms of imposter syndrome, which could be anxiety or self-doubt or feelings of inadequacy. And then that goes on to reluctance to take on new challenges or opportunities. So people might praise you and you're sitting there thinking, if only they knew the truth. But that I don't actually know what I'm talking about here. And that whole saying, fake it till you make it. And I don't want to keep pretending to fake it. So this is something that I really want to focus on, and something that I really want to bring to the forefront. Yeah, it has made me really reflect on my career. A bit of background, exactly what I was just saying before, just in teaching roles, and I was kind of just fell into a team leader role, and then suddenly I was made deputy principal of a school. And do you know what? I actually kept it a secret for a really long time because I was really nervous to tell people, because I was really nervous that people would think, what the heck? Like, why have they made her that job? Why have they put her in that role? So I didn't do the big Facebook announcement. I didn't do anything like that. Obviously, the people at the school knew, community knew, but my friends and family didn't really know for quite a while. And so I went on this crusade of trying to upskill myself. So I would take on any new learning. I would try and listen to all the podcasts. I would enroll in all these different things, all the way through to trying to be available to my staff 24/7, because I thought, well, if I'm available, then I'm showing that I'm being a good leader, and just and went on this absolute crusade for probably for about 2 years. But within that 2 years, my 30-year-old self got shingles about every 2 months. So I was putting myself under so much pressure and stress that my doctor was like, "Bex, this is not normal. You're in your early 30s and you're getting shingles on every second month. What is going on?" And it made me realize that, this was a massive aspect of it, that the imposter syndrome was eating me from the inside out. Yeah, I think it was stress. I think it was stress to try and be this person that I felt like I was not, to try and make sure that I could be a good leader to all my staff, because I loved my staff so much and I felt like they were so much better than I was, and that I couldn't give them anything. And so I was just trying to be available and help them all the time and do all this extra stuff, like try and organize all these cool events at school so people will go, "Oh, she does actually deserve that job. She's doing all these events and doing all these exciting things." But I actually just completely wore myself out. Yeah, so I still actually, because once shingles is in your body, it's dormant, so it just comes out when you get sort of low or tired or things like that. So it's something that I still kind of battle with, but it came from being in this space. So Mark, I have always looked up to you and thought you're an incredible leader. Has this been something that you're like, nah, I'm sweet?
Yeah, I find that funny, because whenever somebody says something like that, I mean, it's exactly the same for I've totally felt like that, like constantly, all the way through my career. I mean, I trained as a teacher a little bit late, so I went through Teachers College as a semi-mature. I think I was 27 when I went into TCOL and came out as a teacher at 30. So I was always a little bit older, and I think maybe people just expected a bit more of me because I was a bit older. But then when you get into that leadership space and you start to put yourself out there and try to, make those steps. I mean, I was offered a team leader role, or behind the scenes, a team leader role very early on. But people in the school that I was working with weren't that keen for me to step into that role. And I always kind of look back on that and thought, wow, that's actually like they didn't have any belief in me, or there was something about that. So little moments like that can kind of follow you around, and there's that little voice in the back of your head that tells you you're not ready to step up. But every time that you do that, like it's like kind of leaning into a cold shower or getting out of your comfort zone. Whenever you see somebody take a risk and apply for another position, or, step into a new role that they've never done before, that's like taking a step of kind of faith in yourself. But then other people don't see what's going on inside your head. They don't see all that self-doubt in the back of your mind.
Totally. And so I think we've established that it is normal and it is okay to feel this way. So I'm gonna talk through a couple of tips, three things that we're gonna do to help combat this. It's not a guaranteed going to fix everything, because it's something that I think if you're susceptible to, you're gonna get it all the time. I mean, I just recently have been I got voted on to a massive high school board of trustees, and I felt. So I couldn't believe it, because I thought, oh my gosh, I got voted by all these people and I got the top votes, and I was like, what is going on? Like, why do these people think I can do this? I can't do this. And then I went to the first meeting and I was so nervous. Like, I was literally sweaty and like, ugh. So I was like, why not? I'm not like all these professional, incredible, career-driven people, and then there's me. Why do they want me on this? But and I still do feel like that every now and then. But I know that I can add value to that because I've got an educational lens, and I think it's really important on board of trustees to have an educational lens. But yeah, it's obviously something that I'm going to continue battling with, and I'm going to learn. I'm going to say these strategies, and I'm going to keep thinking about these strategies when it hits me too. So we're going to all do this together. We're all on the rocker together. So there's
cool.
some things that we're going to talk about. One is noticing and acknowledging thoughts. The second one is looking at what is fact and what is truth. And the third one is increasing your self-worth. So number one, noticing and acknowledging your thoughts. So this is mindfulness 101, and we have become way better at teaching our kids about noticing your thoughts. So being calm, being still, and actually sitting there with your own thoughts. And this is something that once you start noticing them, you can really start acting on. So there's this, and Mark's already touched on it, this little voice that's constantly in your head. And you have a choice to accept it and take it as truth, or you have the choice to ignore it and redirect your thoughts. So so the first part is just noticing your thoughts. So what is actually going through my head right now? What am I thinking about? Because you just do. Have you found yourself sometimes? Don't tell the bosses this, but when I'm on meetings, I'm sitting there on the floor like this, and I'm listening really intently like this. And my brain is going mental, and I'm thinking of all these other things and all this other stuff that's going on. Suddenly they go, Bex, how you felt about that? And I'm like, uh-oh. So those thoughts that are constantly going through your head, those are the ones that you need to start noticing. The second one is looking at what is fact and truth. So you need to ask yourself, is what I'm thinking right now 100% true? Is it, Mark, that you've got your job? Did you put in time and effort into this? Have you worked hard to get where you are today? Or is it that you need a really good look at it and actually don't need to prove anything to anyone? So maybe I am good enough, and own it, those kind of things. You need to work out what is the facts here. So challenge those negative thoughts. You do have, this is a fun fact, you do have between 70 and 90,000 thoughts a day. And this is part of your unconscious thoughts. So the ones that I was talking about before, when you're sitting there and suddenly you realize that you're thinking about breakfast 4 weeks ago. These are unconscious thoughts. You have thousands of rogue thoughts. And when this imposter syndrome is triggered, you'll go down this rabbit hole. So suddenly something triggers your imposter syndrome. Someone asks you a question. And I've had this so many times because I've started it in I've been, here for a year, but at the beginning there was all these acronyms, and I was like, what the heck does that mean? And then I sit there and I go, you shouldn't be in this job, Bex. You don't even know what that word means, and blah, 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 blah. And so as soon as that imposter syndrome is triggered, you go down this rabbit hole. So that at that moment, you have to go, okay, stop. I'm noticing my thoughts, pay attention to what you're thinking, and decide what you are thinking and believing, because you have the choice. So choose a different thought. So when you become conscious with what you're thinking, it is a game changer, and it's actually a life changer. And you'll be more open and aware to praise and take it on board. And I'm not saying this is easy. It does take effort to notice your thoughts, but it can also be a habit. So once you become more conscious and more aware of what you're thinking, and it becomes a habit, and then the easier it becomes. That was
journaling can help with that. Well, journaling can help with that. I do that in the mornings, and often I'll write down things that I'm thinking, or things that I'm struggling through. I mean, I've got a faith, so there's a prayer element to that as well. But have you heard of Mel Robbins? She has a countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just as a circuit breaker for that negative thinking. So as soon as you start thinking that negative thought, and listening to yourself rather than talking to yourself, she goes, right, just count down 5 and get to 1. And then what that does is it stops that thought, and then you can replace it with what you know is true, or what should be something that you're thinking about, sort of stopping listening and actually talk to yourself.
Totally. And so that's also making you notice what you're thinking, because you're actually actively making a choice to stop it and move on. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method is such an incredible method. And actually, let's do a podcast about that whole thing, Mark, because that's
totally.
The third is actually really similar to what you just said. So focusing on your past successes and accomplishments and increasing your self-worth. So looking at your past successes is a great way to reframe your negative thoughts. So instead of focusing on your perceived shortcomings or failures, try and focus on your strengths and accomplishment. So a way to do this is to make a list of your achievements and remind yourself of them when you're feeling self-doubt or anxiety. So write them down, just like Mark was saying, journal them down, and it really help you once you see it on paper, the things that have led you to where you are today. It can develop a more self-positive image and boost your confidence. So it is actually treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer your friend. That's what I always think. I think
That's so good.
would you talk to yourself? Would you talk to like my best friend and say how terrible that they're doing in their career? You know, there's no way that I would ever do that to my friend. So why the heck am I doing it to myself? You know, like, and my friends are fantastic. Like they are my cheerleader squads, and they always. But I find it really hard to take. In fact, it makes me feel really cringy. Although my love language is affirmations, but it's still find it hard to take on. So it gives you a chance, though, once you've written it down, to look back on your career or moments where you felt proud or what you've achieved, and those are the moments that have led you where you are today. So it's a really neat way to be able to reframe those thoughts and turn those negative self-doubt thoughts and turn them into a positive. So I guess just to wrap it up is that I think you have to accept that feelings of imposter syndrome may never go away fully. So instead of trying and eliminate the feelings, learning to manage them and use them as motivation to continue growing and learning is the way to sort of combat it. So I think remembering that everyone experiences self-doubt and that it's okay to ask for help when you need it. So Mark, I might come to you and be like, hey mate, feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome here. Build me up. Give me all the things. Even tell me how good I am, and then and those things are the ones that you need to go back to remember when you're feeling like you're in that space. So yeah, I need to take my own advice as well. I know, but that is a work in progress. But I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're actively seeking ways to improve, and that is an incredible way to learn and grow as well, and to help you in moments like this.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bex. That's really cool. All right, Bex, I'm a little bit excited about this because I think what we've got for today's handy how-tos is quite a lot of really good ideas. Between the two of us, we're just going to come up with some ideas for how you can build community, and we're hoping that this is the start of a series. And around about maybe 3 or 4 different episodes, we'll be covering how you can build community with your school, connecting with your wider community, not only the parents, but obviously the wider community, and also an international community as well. We might dive into that. But on this episode, what we'd like to do is talk about the reasons why a school would use social media to be able to build that community. So let's make a theme around that, and then actually dive into some of the ways that you and I have experienced that working, and some of the things that we see happening now. Because when I first started teaching, there was no such thing as TikTok, probably thankfully, back in those days. It wasn't actually that long ago. It was only like 2008 or something. But to start off, why don't we talk about why schools would use social media? Because you and I see some schools that are absolutely killing it in this space. They're doing amazing stuff and doing amazing work. And then there are other schools that have just, it's not even on their radar, whether they've decided not to do it, and they're going to stick with their paper newsletters. They might email, but that's about all. So I want to give you 4 reasons why why I think schools would use social media, and tell me what you think and if there's anything I've missed. Number 1, the number 1 reason to use social media is to build a bridge with your community. Because for a lot of parents, this is what I've seen, for a lot of parents, they still have a perception of your school as being the administration area, the front of your classroom, and maybe your teacher-only day, where you're a teacher-parent interview, where a parent will come in. But really, the perception that they have of school is what it was like when they went to school, and that could have been the 80s, 90s, or heaven forbid, the beginning of the 2000s. The worldview about what school is really hasn't changed since then. So if you can build a bridge between what you're doing now and show them little glimpses, little selected snippets, you don't show all of the things behind the scenes that you don't want to show. Like you kind of rushing to get assessments done on the last minute of report week or something like that. You're going to show the highlight reel. That's what social media is good at. And then sharing the learning, sharing the events, providing live links to events, like an Instagram live at the sports day where you're getting kids to, interview, students with before they do the 100 meter, or, with those types of things. There are ways that you can provide connection that people are quite keen to jump on. They've all got phones. They're at work, a little notification comes up that my son or my daughter's school is providing a live link. I can jump on them. So that's number 1, build a bridge and a connection. Number 2, I've found over the years that social media is a great way of you archiving your school's history. Because one of the things I love looking back to my days in the classroom is I can go back to that blog and see the things that I was doing in like 2012. Like that's amazing. Because one of the sad things about a lot of school history is that it's sort of in a photo album book, because we just didn't have the technology back then to do anything different. But they were in a cupboard and people would drag them out and blow the dust off, and or accidentally they get thrown in the skip.
I would go through at the end of each year on our one, and that was that created our school magazine. So I went through all of the photos throughout the year, and then used Snapfish or something like that online, and created a movie, a magazine. And it was so cool. The kids loved looking back through all the photos, and it was actually less of a job than what it could have been, because I'd taken the photos throughout the whole year. So it was neat, and it was a really good space to archive them. You're right. That's a great point.
And your, every photo that you put on Facebook or Instagram or some other websites that you might use, those are usually your best ones. So it's kind of like you're filtering, rather than going into your camera roll and sifting through hundreds and hundreds of photos. You've actually done that as you've gone through. So it's a really nice way to archive and then create something for the future as well. Number 3, I've always found that social media is a fantastic way to start conversations in the family home. At the dinner table, in the TV lounge dinner, if you're a TV with dinner person, the opportunity for a parent to say to a student, "What did you do at school today?" And them usually to say something like, "Oh, nothing," or, "I ate my lunch." Actually, for a parent to say, "Well, I saw a blog post about this that you did. Tell what were you doing when you blew up that volcano? What were you, oh, I saw that you did some really interesting PE stuff with hockey sticks and chased each other around, and, tell me about that." So what it does is it creates that window to start that conversation, and then everything can kind of go from there. I've always had parents come and say to me, not every parent would engage with my social media feeds, but the ones that did and were really interested really appreciated having that window. And number 4, this is probably the biggest reason, I think, from a leadership perspective, why it's important for you to be engaging with social media, is that it dispels the myths about the things that might be or might not be happening out in the community. And so every leader knows about this thing called a car park conversation or a street front conversation, where those parents get together and they talk, "Oh, did you see what happened in Johnny's homework? Oh my goodness," there's all of this conversation, and then it grows, and then it becomes this thing where there are some parents who think that, the students don't do any maths, they just sort of go on games all day. Whereas if you're able to share what's happening in the maths program, and I used to be quite strategic about this. I kind of hear whispers or rumours, and then I'd sort of strategically post something that was like a little bit of a thread of something that we were doing in maths, and this is what our maths looks like, and ask your student about the thing that they did. You're actually being intentional about the things that you're showing. It's kind of connected with the saying that mold grows in the dark, and there's nothing like a bit of sunlight to use a bit of disinfectant. So the more that you can show strategically, then that conversation will just kind of get dispelled and put on the back burner. What do you think? Did I miss anything?
No, I just love your analogies. Mark is like the king of analogies. It's involved in the dark. I just come from nowhere, and they're just gold.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, usually my analogies are about they're either about hiking, sports, or cars. Those they usually fall into those 3.
Yeah, totally. So we set up a pretty successful social media campaign at our school, and it ended up being we were semi-rural, so we would actually lose power quite regularly. So having the social media, this might actually be another why, to be honest, if there was no power and we still had data on our phones, we could connect with the community if we had no phone lines or we had no things like that. So actually having a really consistent following and parents knowing that was a port of call was actually health and safety purposes for us, because it was the only way that we could connect. If our school flooded and all the power went out, we could still use our data to put on the Facebook page that kids are all okay. So that's another why. But I'm going to move into the hows now. So what we did was survey the school on what social media platforms are most used in the community. So is it Instagram? Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? And get just a really sort of clear indication on which one was the most preferred platform, and just roll with that one. If you have more than one, it becomes confusing, and it also becomes more, it's just too hard to make sure that it's consistent across all the platforms. So choose one and roll with that.
So
another
given
one
where the
here.
people are.
Yeah, totally. So we used Facebook. That was the most preferred platform for our community. Then we had to
Great.
build a following. So this means posting consistently. So one-off posts here and there that they'll drop off the feeds of your community, so they won't see what's coming up. So making sure that you're posting consistently, and this was once you got in the habit of it, it was really quite easy. So I would be sitting in my office sometimes and look down and I'd see the 5-year-olds doing this epic play-based learning thing. Like one was, building a hut out of twigs, and another one was, sawing a piece of wood and creating an airplane. And I'd go, this is so cool. So I'd go out and I'd take some photos or just jump on a live, and I'd let the teachers know, hey, I'm just jumping on a live, so, be careful. and then, and I'd go, hey, and then I'd say, look, I'm just literally, this is one off, and sitting in my office, I can see this epic stuff going on. Let's take a look and hear from some of the kids. So it was really easy to start posting consistently. The other things were like making sure that I always had photos of the kids getting their certificates at the end of the week at assembly, so the parents would know on a Friday every Friday to look and have a look at who's getting the certificates. And this following not only established our, immediate whānau, but it was actually grandparents that were in England and grandparents that were in South Africa and China, and there was grandparents that were like some of our biggest followers that we just got to see the kids authentically engaging in school. And that was where it really made my heart sing, because I remember, just a bit of a side note, was when we were in COVID, and I would do a Facebook Live on our Jump Jam. So I'd be doing Jump Jam Live, and all the kids would be joining on, and grandparents from all over the world were jumping on, and they just felt so connected in a time that we were so disconnected. So, so that was really cool. So building that following by posting regularly. The next thing is also to make sure you have 1 to 2 main social media content creators. So choose people who have the capacity and also the skills to make sure that regular content is being created and added. So I was one of them. I was the DP, so I sort of had a little bit more time and made sure that that was something that was on my cadence. I was always doing that every week. But also, I'd get a young gun that's just constantly, on their phone and know that there was something cool going in their classroom. So, there'd be a cool maths experiment or a science experiment or a maths program going on, or even just down to group teaching, because just what you were talking about before, Mark, they'd be like, oh, my child hasn't done maths. Well, there's a photo of them doing group maths today, and it might have not looked or felt like maths for them because it was pretty fun, but that was maths, So just
that's right. Yeah.
Making sure that kind of stuff was being documented and popped up. There'd be things like the principal and I would announce, events coming up, and we'd get together and do a video together and then pop it on a Facebook Live, and then they can see that authentic engagement, us building the authentic homeschool partnership with the community. We're here, we're not just sitting behind desks, we're in the classes, we're doing this. Yeah, and the other thing we actually posted quite often was, when you go to, say, like zone sports events or even just school sports events, and parents can't get to them all the time. They work. Reality is the majority of us are working nowadays, so it's really hard to get to events. So when my son was at another school, my daughter was at another school, seeing, their name pop up and they came second, and I'd be like, yeah, and telling everyone at the school, oh yeah, they came second, and that real, straight away I knew exactly how they were doing. So yeah, it's a really important part of school. The one thing to really make sure though is you need to make sure and get permission for kids to be photographed. So just make sure
I was going to mention
have all permission to shoot in classrooms or events, and make sure you're well aware of the children who do not have permission, because there will be some. Yeah. And so that would be something that all the staff need to be across, and if they're in the photos that they just have a little heart over their face, or they're just out of the shot in general, that is really important to get that permission, because there are still there are people out there that are not keen on having their kids photographed.
And sometimes that can be for legal reasons, like I know there's always been those, custody issues, legally, those types of things. But there are parents that if you just have a conversation with them and just allay their fears, a lot of people have this concern that, my child's details are going to be connected with their face, and that someone nefarious out there might use that to manipulate them and those types of things. If you're having the conversation with a parent like that and just reassure them that we never put full names with students, those types of things. I've always found this issue really interesting because I used to find that there were parents who were, anti anything going on Facebook or anything like that. But as soon as the newspaper came out and the newspaper camera came out, then they were quite happy to have their name, their age, where they lived, what their favourite hobby was, all in the newspaper. So, it's kind of a little bit of a tricky one. You just have to navigate carefully on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, for sure. But just circling back, I'm a massive fan of engaging with the community in authentic ways. I think it also brings down those barriers of what you were saying before, like there's still people out there, and I know I've got friends who had terrible experiences at school. So stepping onto school grounds is traumatic. It's traumatic for them, and they don't want to be going into classes all the time, and like going to parent interviews might scare them because they had such a horrible time themselves. So opening it up in this non-threatening way of being able to really explore what their kids are doing and really getting a clear understanding of their child's day at school is just so special for parents. And not only that, it's a really quick way of getting information out to parents. Like I remember going back to being semi-rural, we were on quite a main road and we had a horrendous car accident outside our school, and we had to shut the school essentially and get the kids out.
Wow.
And getting that information out to parents through Facebook was so quick. The parents were like boom, and because it was like didn't have to wait for an email or imagine having to phone everyone, that kind of thing. So it's a really awesome tool to be able to communicate with your community and showcase what you're doing, all the awesome things that you're doing at school.
Especially if you've got a parent evening at the start of the year for new parents and people that are just joining your school. If you're able to show them, look, this is where a lot of our communication comes. We still email you. We still have a weekly newsletter that goes out, those types of things. But we also have a social media feed. If it's Facebook, we show people how to get it set up. If they haven't got it set up, let them know and show them how they can mute things that they don't want to see. A lot of people are kind of anti-Facebook and anti-Instagram and all those types of things because, it's full of all sorts of rubbish. But you can actually show people how to filter that down. That's another topic for another day. But you can create a feed in your social media platform as a user that is totally only the things that you want. And so you can only get notifications from certain things. So if you show a parent how to get a notification turned on from the school, that's life for them. They feel connected. If it hasn't pinged them on their phone, then it's nothing that they need to worry about. I think a couple of other things that come to mind when you're creating content for those social media platforms is to just think raw. It doesn't need to be polished, does it? It can just be, like you were saying, just hit a button, go live, walk around with the camera, be aware of things. But it doesn't need to be like a whole iMovie production. That's something for a different reason. But it does need to be just done, run and gun, they call it. And the best camera you've got is the one in your pocket or whatever you've got with you. So just use your phone. Use your phone as, a really powerful teacher tool. I think that's a really, really good tip for people. One school that I think would be really good to go and check out if you're interested in seeing what an authentic, engaging, community-building social media channel looks like is Manurewa Intermediate in Auckland. If you go and look at their YouTube link, there'll be a link in the show notes. You can see what they do. They have, I think it was their DP, but he's gone on to be a principal of another school, and I think other teachers are picking that up now, but he did a lot of that content. So he would just have a mobile phone on a gimbal that you can buy for about $200 or $300, and he would walk around and he would film that, and I think students helped him out as well. But, basketball games, school assemblies, they're singing chants, it's incredible. You get a real feel of the school. And if I was a parent of that school, that would be a really nice way of me seeing a window into what they're doing. So I hope that was helpful in terms of what a school can do to build community using social media. We're going to keep adding to this as a series and look at different ways that you can build community with the community that you serve. Hey everyone, just wanted to take a quick break to tell you about something that we think you're going to love. If you're listening to this episode and enjoying the leadership conversation, or maybe there have been past episodes where we talk about effective change, getting in front of the disruption that's coming to education, and you've thought it just kind of feels like we're skimming the surface. I wish that we could go deeper into these big issues. Wow, have we got the event for you? The UTB team has been hard at work behind the scenes putting together a brand new education event that's unlike anything that you've seen or we've seen for school leaders out there. Our New Zealand Future Now Leadership Summit is being held in Auckland this April 19th to the 21st. It's the second week of the school term here in New Zealand, of the holidays, and it's something that you're going to not want to miss. Bex, do you want to tell us about what we'll be doing there in the way of fun?
Oh my goodness, I am so excited for this. So, up in Clevedon, or down in Clevedon, is this beautiful venue that is the most Instagrammy venue you've ever seen. It overlooks all of Auckland. It's called Cody Boom Rockets in Clevedon. Now, the first afternoon is a real chance to network with like-minded educators. So, while doing that, you get to have a wee go with some claybird shooting, or hole-in-one golf, or whiskey tasting, or wine tasting, and then a wee little platter and walk around and chatting to people and hearing their stories. And that's a really important part, I think, of it, being able to network with like-minded other educators. Now, the second day is the day with the learning. So do you want to jump into that part, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And all of that fun and all of those events sound so good, don't they? It's funny, when I've talked to leaders, sometimes they say, oh, is this the axe throwing event? Yeah, definitely. Well, it's definitely more than that. Yes, there is going to be axe throwing, but we've also got some hugely influential speakers who are experts in the field of educational technology, change, and how to effectively lead your team through this challenging season. So this is a small event. We do have limited numbers, and we just don't want you to miss out. So tickets for the full 3 days, that's the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, are only $590 New Zealand dollars, and that covers your transport, your food, entertainment, and all of the key speakers, discussion groups, and all of the content that you can handle. And if you're not in New Zealand, and we do have some people coming from overseas, which is fantastic, we do want you to come anyway. Flights are getting cheaper, and we'd love to have you there with us. So all you have to do is go to utb.fyi/FNS for more information, and you can register there or contact us if you'd like to have any more questions. That is utb.fyi/FNS. All right, on the Good to Know section, we've got Paul, one of our trainers on the Sunshine Coast, and Paul's a bit of an AR expert, and we thought we'd get you on today, Paul, just to talk about some of the background behind AR, and not so much the tool specific, because I know that that's something that you do a lot of with schools and with teachers, and diving into how it's used in the classroom. But one of the first things I'd love to know is just a little bit of the background behind AR. You might even need to explain to some of us what AR stands for.
Yeah. So, good to see you, Bex and Mark. It's basically stands for augmented reality. It's been around for a while now. So when we talk about kind of emerging tech, I don't really put it in that category anymore because it's hit mainstream now. It's not like it's something that people are just playing with. I can talk about how it's being used in a minute, but basically it's that layering of digital content in the real world. So when we talk about augmented reality, I often think about, what does that look like? So basically, we know that when we go shopping and that for furniture or something for our house, the best way to see if it actually fits and it's going to work is to place it in the actual house itself. So if I went to the IKEA app, obviously is a really good example, I can test out what the furniture is going to look like and if it's going to fit in my actual location. So for me, that's the best kind of example of what AR is. And it's being used across industry all across the world, which is really, really great to see that being used in a really authentic context.
Yeah, and it's taking it out of your imagination, isn't it? Because most of us for years have had to kind of imagine in our heads what it might look like. And so now it becomes reality. Why do you think AR kind of hasn't caught on really until now? What's the thing that's been holding it back? Because I'd imagine that the software has been there, or the programs have been there to do it for a long, long time, and it's probably been in movies that we haven't even realised. Why is it not really taking off at this stage yet?
Yeah, so when you say it hasn't taken off, I'd say it has, because my whole work is actually based around it. But you're right, it hasn't probably become as mainstream in education as quickly as we thought it might do. So one of the things is obviously hardware. You're absolutely right, Mark. So we need mobile devices for this. So the greater the push towards laptops and Chromebooks and so forth just does not run AR. So for us as teachers, we want our students creating in AR and actually building their own prototypes, but actually viewing it is the really magical aspect. So when we've got hardware that is not capable of visualizing AR, then obviously it's not gonna have momentum in schools, is it? Because we basically can't see it and we can't kind of experience that magic.
Yeah, and it's getting that connection between the virtual world and the real world, I think, is where that, that the two worlds can come together and really make a big impact. So you're telling me that in a lot of the schools that we work in have got Chromebooks or they've got iPads that they bought, 10 years ago, so iPad 2, so neither of those two devices are going to help.
iPad's pretty good because, and I'm a little bit biased because I work in it, but iPad has been built for AR. So it's got the rear camera, the cameras are decent, and all of the stuff that's happening in the background has been built for AR. So AR with Apple has really been a big investment, obviously, going forward. So even some of the early generation ones will run AR successfully, which is really good in regard to, I would imagine 99.9% of schools that have got iPads sitting there, even the older ones, will be able to run AR, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep.
So let's say you're a leader in a school, and Bex, somebody who's across curriculum design, and you're trying to get a lot of planning in place, and you're trying to look a little bit down the future for what your students might need. Why would I, as a leader, care about AR for my students? Why is it something I might want to get into?
So this is the $1 million question. This is the why, which we need to do a lot more critically in education. So Dylan William says everything fits somewhere, but nothing fits everywhere. So for me, it's about where does AR fit? So where does it have the greatest impact? So AR is spatial. So whenever you're dealing in schools, spatial concepts like I'm designing some furniture, or I'm about to do some artwork in the school and I want to see what it looks like on the wall before I actually paint. So that kind of design thinking aspect. Anything to do with spatial concepts, even right down to 3D shapes. Anything that involves 3D that would be better visualized as a 3D object in the real world is better than just on a flat screen. So I always say, start with the arts and start with the creatives, start with how we might be able to reimagine artwork and be able to walk through the Photoshop layers and all that kind of aspect, because for me, that's spatial, that ability to walk through, turn around, look at different directions. And the other thing I think you need to think about if you're going to use AR, and I'm certainly not one to use it for just AR's sake, we need to find the right fit, is we need to think about connection with the real world. So, for example, if it doesn't connect, if the digital thing that I'm layering in the real world doesn't connect somehow, then what's the point? If I go back to the IKEA example, it's got a really strong connection. This is where I'm going to place it. I haven't got time to go down and bring it and deliver it and see if it fits. That's just not doable. But it's got a connection with my real life. It's almost like our students are preparing artwork at school. They're doing some awesome, say, paintings and all that sort of thing. Before it goes home, take a photo of it, put a frame around it, and see what it looks like in the house before you actually bring it home. So if we're doing that with art galleries in industry, wouldn't it make sense to do that in the school newsletter that goes home, where I can visualize my students' artwork in my house before it comes home? So we're looking at, it's almost like looking at case studies. Where does it fit well? Where is it going to work for your context? Because it's not going to work everywhere, but it is going to be really impactful in certain areas. And I think that's the magic, is finding where it fits.
Yeah, Paul, I saw on your Instagram, by Paul Hamilton, by the way. It's one to follow, I tell you right now. I learn something every time you post. You posted up this epic, it was the car one, Paul. So you could see how everything was working. And I'm such a kinesthetic learner. I need to see how things work in order to understand. And I thought when I saw that, I thought, gosh, how awesome would this have been in my science class, or how awesome would this have been in my engineering class, rather than having to look at diagrams that were moving, that were just 2D, or write things down of how they worked, velocity times whatever, all those kinds of things, and actually see it in action. You would definitely pick up those learners that would sit there with this glassy look if they can actually see it happen. So I just think it's just absolutely magical. So
the carpet events was a really good one. Yeah, it was a really good one. So what we did is we just layered a 3D model of a car in the driveway. And then what I did is I applied a little sound around the fan belt where it was kind of making this kind of sound that my car was making to kind of identify it. And it does a couple of things in learning, Bex. You're absolutely right. It's more than the engagement. It's a car is spatial. It's got size and scale to it. So doesn't it make sense for me to walk around it and actually replicate what it would be in real life? It's not real, but it's closer than it would be me looking at a YouTube clip. So the ability to move around. Yeah. And the other cool thing is when we applied the sound in the motor or near the fan belt, it's called spatial audio. So as I get closer to it, the sound gets louder. And as I walk away, so I can almost do a treasure hunt with sounds just by listening with my headphones on. So
how cool would that be for an authentic assessment as well? You know, I can imagine if that was an assessment in a you know, like an actual assessment. There are automotive classes, right? And so imagine if that was the assessment rather than having to read screeds, where there'd be a bunch of kids that do that kind of thing, that actually reading's a barrier, you know? So imagine having that as an opportunity for them to go and say, hey, the fan belt's making this noise, blah, 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 and actually having to fix it through AR. Like, it would just be so much more authentic and relevant for those kids.
So there's two ways of looking at Bex, isn't there? There's that I'm explicitly teaching a concept or a problem, so I'm giving that AR to the kids, which is great. But then there's the other flip side where it becomes an assessment task where I'm designing an AR model with the sounds and everything, and I'm actually teaching someone else about it. So if we flip that assessment of, I'm not just giving AR to teach a concept, but I'm actually getting my kids to develop skills in 3D modeling and all these kind of computer concepts as well, to actually demonstrate a concept in the curriculum itself. So it's kind of both of those, which is powerful, I think.
I keep having this picture of a volcano in my head. You know, if you're wanting to do a field trip or understand how volcanoes work or that kind of thing, like, you can't actually go visit a real life volcano, but if you're actually looking inside it and being able to, you know, transport down and all of those types of things and see the different elements of it, it really does bring a whole another connection to the outside world that you just wouldn't have otherwise.
Absolutely. I always think of it like, what is AR giving the learner or the user that they wouldn't get looking at a screen and a YouTube simulation online? If you can distinguish and say, it's giving me this, this, and this, then you've got the why about why you might utilize it in the classroom. But if it's not giving you extra, and that's why I think we've moved away from videos in AR. In the old days, we used to have an app called Erasmus, and you used to be able to kind of scan something and up pop the video, and it was,
I remember that,
quite popular at the time. But what it was actually doing wasn't spatial. It was actually, I may as well just kind of scan a barcode and have the picture next to it. It didn't have a really strong connection with spatial concepts. And that's why we've moved away from it, as well as the technical of being able to run high resolution video in an AR setting is really quite taxing on the device itself. So yeah, it's interesting how we've developed, and we've gone from that kind of just replicating what's on my laptop to actually something that's more 3D and spatial, and kind of I'm walking around and making use of mobile, because AR in the real world is all about phones. So our iPhones and our phones have got these amazing cameras on the back of them. And so that's where iPad excels, is kind of replicating how we're using it in our lives.
All right. Can you give us some examples? I know you've worked with some schools overseas, you know, to develop some AR projects. What would be something like a little highlight spotlight that you've seen?
It's always good, you guys know this, in regard to starting with a problem, or starting your design thinking or product development with a problem or with empathy, which is a great way of looking at it. I had a student in Chicago whose mum had a Chinese restaurant in Chicago, and he wanted to create some AR for her. And he basically scanned all of their meals. So as she brought out the meals, he would scan them with his phone, and he would create little AR menus that you could put on the menu itself, where people could scan and actually see the size of the portions before they ordered them. And so what he was doing is what we call in AR, it's kind of the capture phase, where he's actually using his phone to capture using a LiDAR scan, and actually capturing the real world and then digitizing it and then putting it back into the real world. So it's kind of like capture, do something with it, and then show. And what that did is it's now attached to her menus, the mum's menus in the Chinese restaurant. And people can scan and actually see what the portion sizes are before they order. So it's
so good.
It's about scale.
That would be a game changer, because that would be a game changer, because you know how, like, you order and then your partner gets the other meal and you're like, oh, I've got food for her. Like,
I should have wanted that. Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
And there was always those dodging, sorry for New Zealand, dodgy, not good. There was always dodging photos of menus that never really captured what the meal actually looked like.
100%.
Like
yeah.
McDonald's.
Like McDonald's. But with scanning, it's kind of like you're capturing the real meal, right? So you're going to get really close to that as well, which is interesting.
So there was a school that I was working with. I'm just sort of relating that to experiences I've had. And I'm thinking, oh man, it would have been so good to do that. So, so let's say you're in a school and you want to capture some of the history of the school. I was working with a school last year with this exact scenario. This school had been there for 150 years or something, and they had, these were where the trees used to be, and this was where the original schoolhouse was. You could actually, obviously, what would you do in that scenario? How would you help that school tell their story to people who are visiting?
Yeah, so there's a whole lot of kind of technical aspects to the AR thing. So one of the things you're talking about, Mark, is kind of geolocation, where I'm kind of scanning places and it's picking up where I am in the world, like your Google Maps or Apple Maps, and it's kind of layering the content over the top. For schools, that's not really doable yet. That tech is not kind of really foolproof and can give you a good experience. But what we could do, because I always think about, we don't want tech to be the obstacle or the hurdle. So we actually want it working well for visitors, and we want it working well. So for me, one of the things that I would do is suggest the old QR codes where I've got a code that I just scan. Let's say it's outside the sides building of the school. And then what comes up is the user can place what that building used to look like right next to it, or in a spot next to it. So instead of layering over the top, it would be good to be able to do that. But at the moment, we want tech that really still has the wow factor that works.
That's great.
So I would actually have either a picture or a 3D model of the old building or the old trees, maybe in black and white to give it that kind of effect of now and then, and actually just scan it and actually have it there. So I think we should always use the stuff that works. So we know QR codes work really well. So being able to layer that content, quickly scanning and then placing, it's an extra step, but it's still going to work, which is what we want in schools.
Yeah, that's great. That's perfect. So if somebody was keen to find out more and they wanted to connect with the great Paul Hamilton and get some training around this, what would we do?
Yeah, just reach out. Obviously, UTV, we're all over on the internet, and you can find us really, really quickly, and it'd be just a case of what you did there, Mark. You might have an idea, or you might say, hey, we've got these devices, Paul. We're not really using them to their full extent here, to their potential. What are some of the things that you're doing in schools that might align with the New Zealand curriculum or the Australian curriculum? Because I'm a really big believer in use what you've got. So, for example, if you've already got something like Procreate and your kids are doing great artwork in Procreate, how about they do T-shirt design or hoodie designs or shoe designs where they're drawing on the 3D objects and then visualizing what they would look like in a retail store? Like, instead of what we typically do, let's take it up a level. Let's kind of update it that little bit more and make them replicate how business and industry are using it, because it's also giving the kids the skills on their resume to say, hey, look what I've done. And some businesses haven't even done that yet. So it's kind of really giving them those important skills going forward, I think, as well.
That's so good.
I
So
think
people can reach out.
Paul, sorry, I was just going to say one thing before we go is that don't be scared of it like that. It doesn't have to be big and new, and it can just enhance what you're already doing. Like, don't not give it a go because it's something seems so big and massive. Like, as Paul just said, it can just enhance what you're already doing. Like, you can make it better, make it more authentic, make it more relevant for your kids.
If you've got some content that the kids are doing on their technology and you want to visualize it in the real world, if you want to make it come off the screen and actually input in the world of the students and the teachers, think of it like that. Think about kind of grabbing and reaching into the screen and kind of bringing it out for the world to see in their context. It's a good way of kind of thinking about it, I think.
So good, Paul. Thanks for joining us. I think you might have won a few people around, and it's definitely going to be a space to keep an eye out as it develops, and the hardware and the software keeps getting better and better. So thanks for sharing.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, final thoughts from Bex.
All right, well, what an episode. AR in education is something that we cannot ignore. It's a tool that can really enhance learning experiences for our students, and I will improve student engagement across all aspects of the curriculum. So go give it a go. Just start playing around with it, I reckon. I hope you do take something away from the Making Waves segment this week. And one thing that you could do to start writing down those achievements that you've had over your career, and have a list on your notes to go back to or refer when you start feeling that imposter syndrome creeping in. And finally, if you want any help with setting up your social media channels for school or want to talk to us more in person about how we can support building your homeschool partnership, send me an email, bex@usingtechnologybetter.com, and we're more than happy to help you.
Awesome. If you're after some of the links or resources that we've mentioned today, including in how to get in touch with us, have a look at the show notes and make sure that you're subscribed to our podcast. Our episodes go live every single Wednesday, barring some major disaster like a cyclone. If you know someone who would get value from these episodes, hit the share button and let them know. And lastly, as always, if you've got any questions or anything to share with us, email us at the team at usingtechnologybetter.com. We'd love to hear from you. See you next week.
See you later.